Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. Uh, and hello from wherever you are joining us from. We'll start soon. Yeah. Hello, everyone. I welcome you all to the fourth webinar in partnership with EMBO. And our webinar is on EMBO fellowships and funding opportunities. I welcome our speaker for today, Karen Dunstray, Head EMBO Fellowship Program. Just a minute. Um, yeah, I hope my voice is clear. Is there any echo? Okay. I welcome our speaker for today, Karen Dumstree, Head EMBO Fellowships Program. I would like to extend a special welcome to our guests who have joined us from outside of India today. Before we begin, a few housekeeping instructions. Please keep your mics on mute, but it'll be great if you can keep your videos on. You can use the chat box to type your questions. All questions will be taken in the Q&A session, which will be towards the end. Also, this session is recorded on Zoom, and we are also live on YouTube. We now begin with the presentation. Over to you, Karen.
Thank you very much for the kind invitation. Can everyone hear me? I cannot see so many of you, but I presume so. I'm really delighted to be here and tell you a little bit about EMBO and the type of funding opportunities we offer at EMBO. I see my colleague Leonor from EMBO is here as well. And so I'm sure the two of us can answer all questions regarding EMBO programs. As Rohini mentioned, I'm head of the EMBO Fellowship Program, and most of my talk today will sort of be devoted to talk about the fellowship programs. But I will also discuss the other funding opportunities that we have at EMBO. So I'm going to share my screen. Let's see how that works. I have so many screens that I can. Here it is. Sorry, I have to. There it is. Okay, yeah. So, and there's going to be plenty of questions afterwards for questions. And so just save your questions, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you have. As I said, I'm head of the fellowship program at EMBO, and the fellowship program at EMBO handles both short-term grants, and I'll go in more detail about them later, and as well as postdoctoral fellowships. But before I get into the fellowships that we offer, I want to discuss or mention to you what EMBO is. So EMBO is the European Molecular Biology Organization, and it's an organization of leading scientists. And it is to promote, and the aim of EMBO is to promote excellence in life sciences in Europe and beyond, and help to build a research environment where scientists can achieve their best work. So that's the mission of EMBO. To do so, we have different programs. So what underlies all EMBO activities is the EMBO membership. So EMBO members are elected based on research excellence, and they're nominated by their peers. And they basically run all activities at EMBO and all the programs. So behind all the programs you have a committee that makes the decisions at the programs. So how do we promote excellence in life sciences? And so it's done via the EMBO Fellowship, which I'll discuss in more detail later, EMBO courses and workshops, EMBO Press, which I will not talk about here, but it's a wonderful group of journals, the EMBO Journal, EMBO Reports, Molecular Systems Biology, EMM, and Life Science Advance are part of EMBO as well, and they have been really innovating the publishing in publishing in general. Then we also have the Young Investigator Program, which I'll talk a little bit about too. I'll talk about the EMBO global activities because it pertains to India as well. There's also a science policy program at EMBO that I also will not discuss so much in this talk. I'm sort of focusing on the programs where you can apply for funding for. Now, so where does the funding come from EMBO? And it comes from the EMBC. And these are basically all European countries that there's 31 member states that donates the money to the EMBO programs. And we can that get the funds, and then it's the EMBO that is deciding on who is awarded for the different programs. Now, the reason that I'm here today is that India is also a member of EMBO, and it's an associated member of EMBO, which means that the programs we have at EMBO is also eligible for life sciences based in India. And so I'm here to try to tell you about the opportunities there is for you and what you can take advantage of. As I mentioned earlier, the key of EMBO is really EMBO members and associate members. At the moment, we have over 2,000 leading life scientists as EMBO members. They are nominated and elected by their peers, and it really recognizes research excellence, yeah? And it's the members that guides all the programs and the funding schemes. At the moment, we have 92 Nobel laureates as EMBO members, and these are the new EMBO members that were awarded in 23. The EMBO Fellowship Office, I'm going to talk about two different fellowships. The EMBO postdoctoral fellowships, which is 2-year fellowships for postdoc with full-on benefits, yeah, like healthcare insurance and retirement contributions. And then I'm going to talk about EMBO scientific exchange grants, which are pretty much short-term research grants to promote international collaborations. Before I go into a little bit more detail about this, I will sort of mention the EMBO courses and workshops. I don't know if any of you have ever attended an EMBO workshop, but these are really amazing workshops. They tend to be fairly small, between 100 and 200 participants, and they focus on the latest development in science. I think the pricing of attending these EMBO workshops is really reasonable. And the beauty of EMBO workshops is that it tends to be in locations that are not so easy to escape from, which means that you will have breakfast, lunch, and dinners with the speakers and all the participants. So it's a wonderful way to get to know people in the field, to network, and to hear about the latest science. The EMBO Young Investigator Program network is supporting young group leaders in Europe and beyond. And at the moment, there's a network of 600 current and former awardees. There's sort of 3 different variations of this program. There's the EMBO Young Investigators. There is the EMBO Installation grantees, which is not relevant for India, and then the EMBO Global Investigators. And I'll tell you a little bit more about the young investigators and the global investigators, because this is also available to scientists based in India. So these are the Young Investigator Program. And to be eligible to apply for this program, you have to be an independent group leader for at least 1 year, but you cannot have been more than 4 years. Yeah, so it's really for young group leaders that are just starting out their independent career. The research must be carried out in the area of life science in EMBC member states and on EMBC associate member state like India. There's a financial awards associated with the EMBO Young Investigator Program, which is 15,000 euros. In addition, you can also apply for small grants up to 10,000 euros per year. What is really key about this program is networking. And there are lots of benefits that I'm not showing you here that can be used to actually network within the community and also broader. And for any young independent group leaders that fall within this the time window of when you can apply, I strongly encourage you to take a look at the website, go to embo.org, and then you'll find the Young Investigator Program, and because there are wonderful benefits associated with it. It's also a very competitive selection process. I also want to mention here the EMBO Global Investigators. And so this is a network that supports group leaders in Chile, India, Singapore, and Taiwan. And this is within the first 6 years of setting up the laboratories. So there's a little bit larger time frame, eligibility time frame. But here you get 7,000 euros per year for the duration of as you are in the program. And again, as with the Young Investigator Program, networking is a key aspect of the program, and there's funding available for networking activities. There's a Young Investigator Network annual retreat, and there's sectoral meetings. And I said networking is key, and that's where the program really facilitates and adds lots of benefits to the program. So Now I'm going to talk a little bit about the postdoctoral fellowship and the scientific exchange grant, which I'm involved in. So I want to introduce your office in case any of you ever come to Heidelberg. So EMBO is located in Heidelberg, a little bit outside Heidelberg. And if any of you come and knock on our door, we're always happy to see people. And if you have any questions. Now, I want to just introduce the team that's part of this program. So I'm head of the program. We have Danielle, who's a senior program officer. We have Rasul, who's a program officer for the long-term, for the postdoctoral fellowships. And then we have Elsie, who's a program officer for the short-term grants. And then we have Kate, who deals with all financial aspects within the office. So I think probably the EMBO postdoctoral fellowships is probably the most well-known of our fellowships that we do. And it was actually launched in 1966. And at the time, it was one of the first postdoctoral schemes that promoted international movement across borders. It is a very competitive scheme. We get about 1,200 applications per year. On this year, it will be about 150 awarded, and so the success rate is about 13%. We just had the fellowship committee meeting in last week to decide on the spring round, and in this round, 65 awards were being offered. The benefits, what this is that it offers, we offer a 2-year contract. Now, if you go within any of the countries that are part within Europe, you actually get a contract. We make a contract with the institute. And so therefore we pay the institute, which then pays your salary. But the benefit of you is that you also get the healthcare benefits are taken care of. There's a pension contribution from your host into the country. So you're part of the social network. Outside of Europe, there we pay a stipend. We offer relocation allowance. We have a yearly EMBO Fellows meeting, and so at the second year, at the end of the fellowship, the fellows are invited to the EMBO Fellows meeting. You can participate in the EMBO Lab leadership courses, which is a wonderful course. So as some of you may know, as scientists, we don't always get training in leadership and how to be good managers. And this leadership course is really excellent in providing this information. And so as an EMBO fellow, you are eligible to apply to take part in this leadership course. There is two important, so that you can submit an application at any time point, but there are 2 evaluation cutoffs. So anything, and they always fall on the second Friday of February, and the second Friday of July. So if you're submitting by the second Friday of February, you enter the spring call, and there we make the decisions in June. Any application received before the second Friday of July enters the autumn call, and there we make the decisions in December. There are eligibility issues for all the applicants. Like, for example, you can only have been a postdoc for 2 years, and you can only have been, in case that you're applying as an already postdoc and you're present in the lab or you're applying for funding you can only be there for 6 months. What is key is when you count the deadline, it's when you submit your proposal. Yeah, so we don't count the deadline when the cutoffs are. It's your personal submission deadline that is the deadline for it. So, for example, if you got your PhD in October of 22, then it's important for you to apply before October 24 in order to be eligible. And so it's your submission date that matters. One key eligibility of it is to promote international mobility, which means that for national mobility, it is where you got your PhD and the country where you're moving to from your postdoc. So it's not your nationality that is so important. It is more that you're moving from the country where you got your PhD into another country where you're doing a postdoc. Yeah. So if you're from India and did your PhD in India and want to do a postdoc in India, you would not be eligible for an EMBO postdoctoral fellowships. International mobility is key for this fellowship. There's no age limit. but you have to submit less than 2 years after your PhD. And as again, it's not the evaluation cutoff dates is not what's important. It's really when you submit. And when you apply, you can have been less than 6 months at the destination country. Yeah. We require at least one research paper in an international peer-reviewed journal or a refereed preprint. I'm always asked what a refereed preprint is, and I have a slide later to show what this is. Yeah, but we do need one first author research paper. So a review would not count. It has to be a research paper, and it has to be in an international peer-reviewed journal or a refereed preprint. What is not allowed is to return to the country where you did your PhD or to work with your PhD supervisor. Yeah, so we want to facilitate new collaborations. In case you did your PhD more than 2 years ago, we are flexible for parental leave if there's mandatory military service or severe illnesses. And so if you have anything that affects your eligibility criteria, always contact the office and ask us if this is okay. The office is incredibly fast in responding, and we want to help you. Yeah. So if you have any questions, you can always call us or contact us via email. I want to sort of mention this international mobility because this is there's 2 different flavors of it. So if you want to work in an EMBC member state, and that's basically if you want to work within member states within Europe, then anyone. So if you want to go to Germany, and you can see on our web page which are EMBC member states. So anyone can apply for a postdoctoral fellowship, regardless of nationality or country where PhD was obtained. Yeah. So to work within Europe in an EMBC member state, there are no. It doesn't matter where you come from. If you want to work in an EMBC associate member state, which India is, countries or territories that are covered by a cooperation agreement, there are 3 criteria that has to be met. And so this is, for example, if you want to go from, let's say, Germany and you want to do a postdoc in India. So what you have to, applicants, they have to be either a citizen and they have to move from and be a citizen of the following countries or and have performed their PhD in the following countries. So either you have come from an EMBC member state or you come from an EMBC member state or a country territory covered by a cooperation agreement. Yeah. And so these are just for applications to work within EMBC associate member state like India. Yeah, there you have to be a national, have done your PhD in either one of these. Yeah, and so it'd be important to be aware of your eligibility criteria. As I said, anyone who wants to work in an EMBC member state, nationality or country where you did your PhD is not relevant for us. So I was talking about earlier a refereed preprint, and what is this? And basically a refereed preprint is a package of author's manuscript, reports from peer review, and the author's response. Now, this has to be deposited on a preprint server like bioRxiv, and we call them a refereed preprint. So there are not so many platforms that allows to have the referees transferred to bioRxiv, but Review Commons at EMBO Press or eLife are 2 such things that allows you where these platform or journals will basically transmit the referee comments to bioRxiv. Yeah, so a submission. So if you upload your manuscript to, for example, bioRxiv, that is not enough to count as a first authorship publication. You can list it in your CV, that's fine. But for it to count as a first author publication, it has to be referee preprint. Yeah, and as I said, Peer Review Commons is one of the platforms that offer this. We also don't use any journal-based metrics, such as journal impact factors or journal names as a base for selection. And when you submit your application, you are not allowed to mention journal impact factors. Yeah, of course, you mention the journal names in your CV where you have published, but don't mention journal impact factors. Now, how does the evaluation process work? There's the first step is that the office checks all the applications for eligibility. And then the applicants are sent to the fellowship committee. The fellowship committee, and so at each application round, we have about 600 applications. And so the fellowship committee then evaluates and ranks the applications initially. Out of this ranking, then the top 1/3 of applicants are selected for an interview. This interview is online. Yeah. And so for the 1/3 of top applicants, they're interviewed by an EMBO member or young investigator. And this is an expert within the field of your study. After this interview, the EMBO member or the young investigator will submit the interview report back to the office, and then we send them back to the fellowship committee, where they then reevaluate the applications, the report from the interviewer, and then they decide on the funding. And so this is how the process works. As I said, for the next call we have is middle of July, so in a few weeks, and the decision will be made in December. And so the reason it takes a big chunk of time is that there's basically 3 steps in the evaluation process. The interview is done online. In the past, it was done by real in-person visits, but now it's done online. And from what I hear from applicants, even if the application is not, the outcome of the application is not positive, this 1 or 2 hour interview you have with an EMBO member, young investigator, where somebody really has time to talk to you about your project, is really an eye-opening and a very, very positive experience. I sort of was thinking of some tips for when you write your proposals, and these tips are sort of for EMBO postdoctoral fellowships. Yeah, so it can be that for other funding schemes they have different rules and tips, but so this is specifically for EMBO postdoctoral fellowships. So hypothesis-driven research. Yeah, there has to be a reason why you want to propose. So when you submit your proposal, your application, you have to submit a proposal of the work you're going to do as a postdoc in the lab where you're going to do the postdoc. Yeah, and having a biological question and a hypothesis is really strengthens your proposal, and it's really very important. And so all these points, they sound very intuitive, but I've read enough proposals to see that where this sort of is not very clearly. So make sure that you clearly state the goals. Yeah, what is the goal of this proposal? What's the aim and what's the objectives? Yeah, and each proposal should have a clearly spelled out aim, what you're trying to achieve in the 2 years and how you will do it. So the aim is what you want to do, and the objectives is how you're going to do it. Structure the proposal in a logical and organized way. I know this sounds so intuitive, but we often see people where it is really a very confusing mix and match of how they put it together. I always find subheadings incredibly helpful, so use this if you find it helpful too. Now, in the proposal, you are asked to describe the experiments and describe them in experiments in enough detail that somebody who reads it will know what you do. Now, you don't have to mention concentrations of your buffers and stuff like that, but there has to be enough detail that the reader will be able, the evaluator will be able to know what you set out to do. One big thing is consider feasibility of the project. Sometimes we see proposals that is enough for 5 years of research work. And this then the fellowship committee says, well, this is not feasible. Yeah, nobody can do this amount of work in 2 years. So consider this. EMBO postdoctoral fellowships are for 2 years of postdocs. Now, how you will drive the project after the fellowship, that's of course a different matter. But what you're applying for funding for is for 2 years. And therefore feasibility of the project and timing is important. Yeah. So don't propose work for 5 years. Yeah, it never works for you. Include a timeline is always very helpful. How much time do you estimate that the different objectives will take? And if the project is more risky, make sure you mention alternative approaches. Yeah, it is just if your aim or objective 1 is a very, very risky, where you're using a new technique. If this fails and all the objectives are depending on objective 1 works, then you have a very risky project. And so there, if the project is more risky, make sure to mention alternative approaches in case that approach doesn't work. And proposals should be easy to read also for non-experts. Yeah, and this is very important because they have to appreciate the significance and novelty of the work proposed. Yeah, so you shouldn't dumb down the way you write the proposal, but it should be readable. Yeah, and it should not be filled with jargon where somebody has to look up what all these jargon means. Additional few points. Consider novelty and potential. And basically, if you are awarded a postdoctoral fellowship, we want to see that this is a project that will enable you to establish yourself as a new group leader. Yeah. So does the project that you're proposing, does it have potential? Is it novel? Will it be a project that would take you as a independent group leader at some point? Yeah, this is what we want to fund. Make very clear what skills you want to learn in the host lab and how this will form the basis of your future independent research career. Yeah. Be precise and explain why the project deserves to be funded. Yeah, this round we got 600 applications. We awarded 65. There are lots of proposals that your proposal will be compared to. Yeah, so be precise and explain why this project is novel, why it has potential, and what you will do. Have a distinctive approach, yeah, and to set your work apart. And for the EMBO postdoctoral fellowship, this is very important. If the project is a continuation of what you did as a PhD student, we will not fund it. Yeah, so it has to be a project that is distinct, and that's just for the EMBO postdoctoral fellowships. There are other funders that will fund different things, but for the EMBO postdoctoral fellowship, we want to fund projects that is different from what you did as a PhD student. Because we want to see innovation and we want to see you taking charge and want to learn new skills that will make you successful in your later career. Choosing a host lab, this is really important. And choose the host lab that fits your training and research needs. Yeah, when you go from your PhD, so there's not so many times in your research career where you can sort of shift things around. Yeah, going from a PhD to a postdoc is one of those choices. Yeah, where you can choose exactly what you do. The benefits at the PhD postdoc career is that you also have some experience. You've done a PhD, you know what worked, you know what lab environment suits you best. Some people work better in a team environment. That has always been how I like to work best. Other people work best on their own. And so find the lab that fits your needs and fits what you want to do. It's really, really important. Ask yourself, what new skills will you learn in the lab? And what's your motivation for choice of the host lab? This is also things you have to justify in the application. Yeah. And so it has to be a host lab that fits your needs and it should fit the project. If you're applying for a specific project, but it looks like there's not really the expertise of the host lab, it will also be seen as a negative. Yeah. So the host lab's expertise should fit your proposal. So just to sort of sum up what's the EMBO postdoctoral fellowships, what the fellowship committee looks for, we look for novelty, creativity, interdisciplinary, it has to be feasible, and there has to be a biological significance, and there has to be a question that has to be asked. For the place, we look for expertise if it matches your project and the scientific environment. For the person, for you, scientific achievements, your past, what's your background knowledge and depth of critical thinking. And that's sort of what's being in the interview being assessed. I want to go over the scientific exchange grants because these are actually wonderful grants, and they are, I think, where the postdoctoral fellowships are well established and well known. The scientific exchange grants have been around for a long time too, and they are wonderful. There were former called short-term fellowships, and they're for researchers at all career stages. The minimum requirement is 1 year of graduate research experience. We get about 650 applications per year. The success rate is 45%. Now, how short is the short-term fellowship? And it's any visits from 1 week up to 3 months. What this program will cover is travel costs and daily rate. And the daily rate is based on the country where you visit. We do not cover bench fees or visa costs or anything like that. You can see on our website what the daily rate is per country. For this, there's no deadline. So for the postdoctoral fellowship, there are 2 cutoff dates. For this program, there is no deadline. It's a continuous evaluation. You have to submit 1 month before you want to go to the host lab. But the review process, because they're all reviewed by an advisory board, they on average take between 2 to 4 months. Yeah. And so keep that in mind. If you really need the funding from EMBO, don't apply 1 month in advance. You will still be eligible to apply, but you will not get a decision by the time you travel. Now, in case you applied 1 month before the visit, you go to the visit, and then you find out that you have been successful, we will pay retrospectively, yeah? But keep in mind that it takes about 2 to 4 months for a decision to come back to you. So don't, if you're really counting on the money to prevent yourself from getting stressed out if you got the funding or not, apply it well in advance. This program has no age or career restrictions. 1 year of graduate study. So PhD students, master students, postdocs, PIs can apply for it. Here, international mobility, just like the postdoctoral fellowship, are required. But this one there's only exchanges between EMBC countries and for you, associated countries. So from India, you can apply for SEG to go to either a cooperation party like Taiwan or Chile, or to any of the EMBC countries. And very importantly, the aim of scientific exchange grant is to establish new collaborations, yeah? Which means that if we see that there's co-publications between the home and the host lab, or there are joint grants, it will be rejected, yeah? So we want to establish new international collaborations. What we look for, again, there has to be a biological questions being asked, yeah? You have to have specify aims and objectives. This scientific exchange grant is not a personal grant that is for the applicant. It's also for the home labs, which means that your project has to benefit the home laboratory, yeah? So either it's a new technique or an expertise or a model system. The project also has to be based on what the home lab does, and it has to be based on your project, yeah? So it has to be a collaboration that will benefit you to continue your project or to start it in new avenues, and that's very important. Again, establish new collaborations is key. It has to be feasible. As I said, it's maximum 3 months of funding. Don't overshoot what you want to, all the experiments you want to do, make it feasible. And there has to be a good justification for the proposed host laboratory, yeah? So if the host laboratory is not the key leaders in the field, it will lower the ranking of the application. Yeah, so choose the right host. As I said, they're all evaluated by the Scientific Exchange Grants Advisory Board. For this, for the short-term grants, again, and as I say, I see them all. And what is really important that you describe the key aim and objectives. Yeah, when I read your proposal, I should know when I read your summary what question you want to address, and I should get a little bit insight into how you want to do it. Again, make sure that the proposed research plan is feasible. Yeah, don't propose experiments for 1 year when you only have 3 months, because it will be rejected because the board will say, well, this is not feasible. Yeah, so you're overshooting in what experiments you want to do is not helping you. Yeah, so this is not to show off everything that you would love to do. It is really to provide very targeted experiments, what you need to do. Provide a research plan and a timeline for each objective. So often the proposal don't have a timeline, which makes it a little bit more difficult to judge feasibility. And then describe the benefit of the project for the home lab. Yeah. If the benefit is just for the applicant, they will also reduce the ranking of the application. It has to be a benefit of the homeland. And as always, justify the choice of host lab. Yeah. This is not for you to go and explore wonderful cities. It's for you to do research and make up international collaborations with the right people in the field. I have, as the last part of sort of just a few slides, and this is sort of just some general tips on sort of how to write grants in general. And one is know your funder and the aim of the scheme. Yeah, each funder or funding agency has their own aim and they have their own guidelines. Yeah, I know people sometimes guidelines seems like a lot of work to read, but know your funders and know the aim of read the guidelines what they're looking for. Yeah. So, for example, if you're applying for a postdoctoral fellowship and you want to apply for EMBO, if you have a proposal where you're basically going to do the same set of experiments that you did as your PhD in your postdoc work, which might make complete sense and it might be the right thing to do, the EMBO postdoctoral fellowship is just not the right one because we look for different projects. Yeah. And so this is really important to know what the funder is looking for and what they do it. Know your audience. Yeah. And the audience, I mean, who are the evaluators? Be kind to your audience. Yeah. Your application will be read by scientists. Make sure you present them a well-crafted proposal. Don't send them a draft. Yeah. Because there's nothing that irritates anyone, all of us, more than reading something where people haven't really thought too much about how to put it together. Yeah. So think there's going to be somebody reading it. So it has to be logical. It should be easily to assess. There has to be a clear hypothesis. And so that's what I mean by being kind to your reader. Avoid field-specific jargon. Write clear sentences, often short sentences works really well. Proofread, correct typos. And with writing, it is a matter of writing, editing. And the way the writing takes place, that initially your proposal is way over character. And then you write, you edit to narrow it down, and you write and you edit and write and edit. And that's how it works. I don't know about you, but I'm from my own writing, there's sometimes you come up with these sentences or paragraphs that you just fall in love with. And you just want to keep them in because you have really nailed something, but at some point they don't sort of fit in your overall narrative anymore. And so when you edit your text, anything that's not necessary, remove it, even if you like how you wrote it. Contact your references early. For the postdoctoral fellowship, we have clear submission guidelines. Yeah, and we're pretty tough. If you submit a few days over your personal deadline, and you haven't notified us, then you will be rejected. Yeah, and so contact your references early. That is your responsibility to make sure that all the documents are in. And one of the biggest advice I can give you, have your mentor, have your colleagues read your proposal and provide input. This is really, really helpful because they will be honest with you if something doesn't work. And so really get input on how to write proposals. How to write a proposal, nobody is born to write perfect proposals. It's a matter of learning how to do it and use your friends, colleagues, and mentors to help you for this guidance. And lastly, about writing a proposal, it will take many drafts to get the proposal right. Yeah. Sometimes when you have written a proposal and you send it to your friends or your PI, you might get lots of comments, red notes or red comments back, and it might be a bit painful. But trust me, it's more painful to get constructive comments back from your peers than to get them back from evaluators. So be open to criticism. Yeah, just accept it. It's part of the process. And lastly, don't ever be afraid to apply something. Yeah. Remember, there will always be a next time, and each time you apply, you learn something new, and which is what we as scientists is driving us forward. Yeah. So if if you're hesitant to apply, or you feel it's a lot of work, or you're a little bit afraid because you think your chances are not very good, don't be afraid. Jump into it and embrace it, and take the opportunity. Here's how you can contact us, fellowships@embo.org. We also have a Twitter or X account, I guess that's what it's called now. Yeah, and so anytime you can always contact us. And I'm now able to take some questions, and I'll stop sharing.
Thank you, Karen. That was a wonderful presentation. And particularly interesting was the historical aspect of the EMBO fellowships, the postdoctoral fellowships. And we can see how impactful these fellowships have been. That's really great.
Nice, thank
We
you.
have, yeah, we have more time for questions now. So there were some questions that were in the chat box, and one question was sent yesterday. So we will first take that question, and then we will consider the other questions. So this question was by Tejan, and when you mentioned about peer-reviewed preprints, the question is about if their first author paper is currently under review, but the journal doesn't publish peer-reviewed preprints. So is it okay if they provide an email communication or some communication stating that the paper is under review? Will that be accepted for?
No, so we don't
Okay.
accept that. That's the reason why we're only working with reviewed preprints, because it's really hard for us to make sure authenticity. So it has to either be a first author publication or a refereed preprint, and these are the only two things that count. Now, where we do make an exception is, so let's say you have your first author paper has been accepted, but is not in print yet by the time you're submitting. If you send us the acceptance letter from the journal, we will accept that. Yeah. But anything in revision where there is no preprint or where there is no referee preprint, we will not accept as a first author publication.
Okay. We have a question by Ritu. Is a letter of invitation required, or is it optional?
So I presume this letter of invitation is meant from the host. So for postdoctoral fellowships and the short-term grants, the host who you are applying to, they both have to upload reference letters as well. Mm-hmm. And so you have to choose your host before applying, and the host has to agree to take you if the project is funded. Yeah.
Monica asks if a candidate has spent few months in Germany on a research stay, is he or she still able to eligible to apply under the postdoctoral fellowship?
Yes, if it was below 6 months.
Okay.
So if you have spent, and you can look at our guideline, if you have spent more than 6 months in the country where you want to do your postdoc, it would make you ineligible. Yeah.
Okay. Can we take a few questions right now live where people can unmute and ask? You can raise your hands and then we can allow you to unmute. Shraddha, yes. Shraddha, you can ask your question.
Ma'am, I have a question that do we need to pre-decide which lab we are going to apply for the postdoc?
Yeah, so you need to have you need to know where you want to go, because for the lab where you're going to go, it makes it's important for us in the assessment, yeah, because it has to match your project. So you have to have a lab where you want to go to. The postdoc advisor has to have agreed to take you if you get funded, and we need a reference letter from the host lab.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Akriti, you can ask your question.
Thank you for the presentation, ma'am. I wanted to ask if computational biology or bioinformatics proposals are generally funded in the postdoctoral fellowship, and
Yes.
what is okay?
No,
thank you.
Go ahead.
And second, the second question is the 2 years timeline considered after the submission of thesis or the completion of the final viva?
So I'm sorry I cut you off. So with the first question about scope, Computational biology is, that was the topic you were talking about. Yes, is part of our scope. And what's always important is that there has to be a biological question. And so for all our proposals, if there is a biological question within the subject category, then it is eligible for it. The second question was, I forgot that again. What was that again?
About the timeline after the submission, is it after the submission of the thesis or after the final viva?
So when you say the final viva, that's when you actually got the official document from the university. Yes, is that correct?
Yes, actually in India, sometimes the degree is awarded like in a period of 6 months or 1 year at the annual program, which happens. So it takes time somehow. So how is it?
So the fellowship office always tries to work with you on this. And if it becomes a bit difficult, so we usually will accept the official date that you were awarded, yeah. But for any of those things where the deadline is really tight with eligibility, contact the office, because if we approve it, then you'll put it in the fellowship application has been approved by the office. It just makes life a lot easier, yeah. So when eligibility issues become a bit tight and you're unsure, just contact the office.
Thank you, Karen and Akriti. We'll take few questions from the chat box now. So Homan asks, how will we know whether a PI or a scientist is under the EMBO around in the European universities? This is a common question where someone else has also asked about any specific lists available to know about who can be a potential host.
No, so it's basically any laboratories in the EMBC associate country, EMBC countries. So it's anyone. We don't provide institute list, and it's basically relevant. Yeah, what matters is finding the right host. So it's really country specific.
Okay. Ishani asks, for EMBO postdoctoral fellowships, are the number of research papers a metric for selection? So if someone has a first author paper and say a joint first author paper, then do they get an advantage?
So everyone has to have a first author paper, whether it's a joint first author paper or first author paper, it doesn't really matter so much to us. So the fellowship committee will evaluate the applicant and the strength of the applicant. And of course, in different fields, there's different publication dynamics, yeah. And so, of course, the fellowship committee will take into consideration the field that the applicant is in, the background of the applicant, and so there is, so as I said, the minimum requirement is one first author, either joint or first author publication, yeah. And the committee takes it into consideration, the field, and as well as the applicant, where the applicant is from.
Ananya asks, can a national of EMBO associate member state apply for postdoc fellowship to work in a non-EMBC member state? Is that allowed for?
No, that's not possible.
That is not.
So it's only to go to a non-EMBC member state, you have to be a national of EMBC member states.
Okay.
Yeah. So.
Okay. Now again, we give a turn for people to unmute and ask. Deepakash, you can ask your question.
Hi, ma'am. So for exchange programs, I wanted to know, like, do we select the host or host laboratory, or is it like we apply and then the host laboratory is selected, or how is it done? Or so we have been in touch with the host previously before applying?
Yes. So you choose the host lab, and you have to have a host lab agreeing to host you before you apply. Because part of the application process for the short-term grants is that we need 2 letters of recommendations, one from your current supervisor, and then a second one, and then we need a letter from the host supervisor, so where you're going to go to agreeing to do these collaborations. So you have to have found a host lab before you apply.
I get it. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Anyone else? Prakhar, you can unmute and ask. Prakhar, are you there?
Yeah, I'm there.
Yeah.
My question was, it was about the idea of research. Like, is it has to be translational, or like can we just do the basic science also? Like, is it
No.
supported?
So EMBO is all about molecular biology and basic science.
Okay.
So it can be basic science, it can be translational. We have as part of our subject categories ecology and evolution. And so if you look at our guidelines, pretty much all subject areas are covered within. Yeah.
Thanks. Anbar Hassan has asked, can a patent be an alternative to a published paper? This has also come in the chat box.
Can what? Excuse me?
A patent, can it be an alternative to a published paper?
No. We need to see a research publication.
Okay. Enrique, you can unmute yourself and ask your question. Enrique, you're there? Okay, I'll just read the question. For the EMBO postdoctoral fellowship, how long should the receiving institute acceptance letter be? As in, long meaning I didn't understand. Maybe they're asking about the scope. Like who has to write it? Should it be written by the supervisor or some dean, or who should be writing?
No, so this is email written, this is the letter written by the host supervisor, who will assess the project and the applicant. And the way we do it is that when you send your application in the system, you will activate your references and the host institution, the host supervisor. And basically you will activate them, and this triggers an email to all to the host supervisor, who will then fill out and form online, and that only we can see. So it's a confidential comment, when you add your references and your an email address of the references and the host supervisor, we ask that these are institutional email addresses. And if they're not institutional email addresses, we will go back to you and requiring a letter of recommendation with using an institutional email address. It's just important for us to validate the authenticity.
Constanza, can you unmute and ask your question? Constanza Gonzalez.
Yes. Thanks for the presentation. I have a lot of questions about the acceptance letter that begin from the receiving institute. You have a specific structure. What is the important information that we include in the?
So the letter from the accepting institute is really up to the host. And the host will be guided through different questions. And so there's nothing you as an applicant can really do. It's all very automatic, and that's something the host will fill out.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks. Shraddha Tripathi, you can unmute and ask your question. Shraddha? Okay. Yeah, anyone else would like to unmute and ask? Ajal has a...
I have a question.
Okay, yes, Shraddha. Yes.
So I have a question that this opens only twice in a year, right? February and the July, or it is every time?
No, it's these two. For the postdoctoral fellowship, we have these two cutoff dates, and they're always second Friday in February, at 2 European time, and second Friday in July. And when you apply for these things, do yourself a favor. Don't hit the submit button 5 minutes before the application deadline. The application deadline is a firm, and we import everything that comes in at 2 o'clock European or German time, and anything that comes after, we do not take it. It goes into the next round. And so I think this is sort of a general recommendation. When you apply for something, don't wait to the last minute, because there can be things happening. Your internet gets stuck or something. Give yourself the space to have the peace of mind to submit the application. And we see it all every time, and I never really understand it, but we see it is pure stress with people saying, oh, the internet is being slow, I cannot submit my application. And it's really, this is your responsibility. Yeah, so it's a very sharp deadline.
Thank you.
Thanks. Praful asks if the fellowship can be extended for more than 2 years.
No, unfortunately not.
The next question is by Sakshi. If an applicant is rejected in one cycle, then can they reapply in the next cycle, and how does it affect the credibility in the selection?
So for the postdoctoral fellowships, you are eligible to apply twice, assuming you're still eligible. So if you apply for the next round and you're no longer eligible, then you cannot do it. Yeah. So you can apply twice if you at each stage are eligible. Yeah. So if you were eligible for the spring round, but get rejected, you would be in principle eligible to apply one more time. But let's say you have been more than 2 years, then by the time the autumn round comes out, you cannot apply. Also, for reapplications, there has to be a significant difference in either your CV and or in your proposal. So you cannot simply submit with the same CV or the same proposal, yeah, because this has already been evaluated. And for resubmissions, or for reapplications, we require that you specify very clearly what is new in your CV and in your proposal. Now, for the scientific exchange grants, you can reapply as many times as you want, but it can only be 1 year after your previous application. Yeah, but you can apply once a year. But if you reapply for the short-term grants, it has to be for a different project and a different lab. Yeah, so you cannot reapply for the same project and the same host lab.
Thank you. Ajar has a question for short-term exchange, that is scientific exchange programs. Is it required to mention the benefits that the home lab is going to be going to get?
Yes.
It is important.
And there's a specific part in the application where you have to specify this. And the home lab is also the home supervisor in the recommendation or the reference that he or she provides is also required to specify what are the benefits for the home lab.
Okay, thanks. Does anyone want to unmute and ask?
Yes, can I ask one question?
Yeah, please go ahead.
Yeah, so this is a follow-up questions of what Karin already said, that there is no list of PIs because every PI is eligible in EMBC countries. But
Right.
my question is not about their eligibility, but their availability. Because if they're available, it is easy for us to whoever willing to approach them and easily get their consent for having them as a host. But approaching random people through cold email and getting rejected, this process takes a long time and unnecessarily time for us also. So can you provide us a kind of list of or database?
No.
Yeah.
So this is really the job of you. Yeah, it's not the job of the funders to give list of who you can apply to. Yeah, so that is really your job. Yeah, and this is remember the postdoc. It's not just finding a lab. It's finding a lab where you really want to go to. Yeah, there has to be a reason for you to go to this lab. It's, as I said, it's not just finding a place. It's finding what fits you. Yeah. And when you apply for different postdoc labs, try to avoid sending the same email to everyone, because it's an easy to say no to. Yeah, invest time in phrasing how when you apply a lab, invest time in why you want to join their lab. Yeah, if you just send the same emails around, it's not going to be not going to be very successful. Yeah, specify why you're interested in joining the lab.
Okay. Aditya Sharma has a question. Aditya, you can unmute and ask your question.
Hi. So my question is, if I work in an offshore campus of an Indian university, say in Middle East, am I still eligible to apply for the scientific exchange program?
Oh, that's a good question. No, you would have to be based in India.
Okay.
Unless you're doing sort of unless your PhD, your primary place of a PhD is in India, and you're doing like let's say a 3 months exchange in this place, but your primary place has to be in India.
So I've done my PhD from India, but I've worked as a young, you can say, young assistant professor, and just like within the first year or so of in an offshore Indian campus of offshore campus of an Indian university.
Yeah. So this gets a bit more tricky. What you can always do, and I have to sort of see what the campus is, and I have to look into the specifics. So you can email me, and I'll give you more specific information.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, Aditya Chedere, you would like to unmute and ask a question. Yeah, please go ahead with your question. Aditya? Okay. Yeah, can you hear us? You can ask your question.
Hello.
Yeah,
Hello.
Aditya. Yeah, sorry. You can ask your question.
Yeah, I am Karishma. Uh, I wanted to ask you that what is the potential factor for this application, and after application applying the program, after how many days will I get the result?
For the short-term, the scientific exchange grants?
Yeah.
Yeah. So the scientific exchange grants, anytime, it usually takes 2 to 4 months. Yeah. So once you submit an application, you will get an acknowledgement from us once we have checked all the eligibility issues, and then it gets sent out to review. And so I said, count in 2 to 4 months. If we're faster, well, that's a benefit for you. Yeah.
And what is the potential factor for this application?
The acceptance,
Yes,
the acceptance rate?
Yeah.
Yeah. So at the moment it's about 45% for the short-term grants. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. And what about for the long-term grants?
At the moment it's about 13%. 13.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Prakhar has another question. Prakhar, you can go ahead and ask.
Hello. My question was about the topic. Let's say have worked in my PhD on a X protein in terms of, let's say, development, but now I'm looking for a postdoc and I want to do the same work, but in terms of defense signaling, let's say something else, but on the same protein. Will it be okay, or like have to completely pick a different topic?
If you have really good justification that the protein is involved in this process and
Okay.
that you're using completely different techniques and model
Exactly.
system, and then it would be okay. Yeah.
Okay.
But there has to be something, there has to be a reason for you to continue looking at the protein.
Okay.
Like a really good reason. Yeah.
Okay.
And there has to be then a completely different you're looking, so if you looked in development, maybe you look doing I don't know, in the immune system or doing defense mechanisms. Yeah, but there has to be, there you really have to justify why you're continuing looking at the same protein as in your PhD study.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah. Anyone else would like to ask a question? They can unmute and ask the question. We still have a couple of minutes.
Hello, I have a question.
Yes, please go ahead.
Yeah, so the question is for the scientific exchange grants where the period is 1 week to 3 months. So if it is for 1 week or 2 weeks, so there won't be a proper full length proposal. It can be some technique and it should be feasible to be completed in that timeline, right?
Exactly. Now you still have to provide why you want to do it. Yeah, there still has to be a biological question behind it.
Okay, so like I can justify that it can help me to complete the project which I'm continuing over there. So it is a roadblock. So once I do that, and then it can be completed, something like that, right?
Exactly, but it still has to, you still have to fill in a summary. You still have to fill in background. You still have to fill in why you're doing it and what.
Yeah.
So, but if you're doing a 2-week stay for a specific technique, that is okay, as long as it's all very well laid out why you want to do it and how it's going to benefit you.
Okay. And one more question, like for us, it can be any EU or it can be associate. So when I say associate, then the Singapore is the one, and then you have Taiwan is the corporate. So any three type or the criteria of the labs in these countries will do, right?
So I missed the first part. So where are you based in?
So if I'm from India, so if I want to apply in Singapore, right? Singapore is a feasible thing because it is an
Yes.
associate or it.
Yes, correct.
Okay, fine. Thank you so much. It was very insightful and it will help a lot. Thanks a lot.
Perfect. Thank you.
Is there anyone else who wants to ask the question? Just one
Yes.
last, yeah, please go
I'm
ahead.
Monica.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask about the postdoctoral fellowship. So, if the research stay has ended 5 years ago, say in 2019, so is the candidate still eligible to apply to the same country in 2024?
Yes, assuming it's to a different host.
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah. So then
To a
you would be
different lab,
eligible.
to a different host.
Exactly.
Okay. So that works out.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you so much. Thank
You're
you.
welcome.
Thank you, Karen, for your presentation as well as the interaction during the Q&A session. At this moment, I would also like to thank all the participants who have joined us from across time zones. We've had a really very interactive chat box and also a live Q&A session. Please take a moment to fill the feedback form and leave a feedback. Please also keep a watch on our website and on our social media channels. Our next webinar on EMBO will be with EMBO will be on EMBO Press and Open Access. Again, I would like to thank everyone who joined us. And I'm sure, Karen, there are going to be a lot of applications for the EMBO postdoctoral fellowship.
Nice.
Yeah, I would
And-
also like to, yeah, please go ahead.
No, I just also want to thank you and for your questions and wish you good luck with everything. Yeah, it's an exciting time to be in science. Yeah.
Yes.
So
I would also like to thank Leonor, for answering some questions in the chat box. And I would like to remind our attendees that if you have missed a part of the webinar or if you were not able to attend the complete webinar, then it will be available, the entire recording will be available on our YouTube channel, and it will also be published on our website. So thank you everyone for joining us and see you all soon. Thank you. Bye.
bye.